Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Test Don't Guess Tuesday. I'm Melissa Hall-Klepacki, your functional gut health expert. And this is the forum where I take a look at GI map testing from clients and tell you what we found and what we did. I start with a little bit of their symptomatology and then explain why gut testing is so important and how much we can learn from it. So this week I bring to you a super interesting case of a 42-year-old man, looking at my notes, who came in with fatigue, joint pain, and bad allergies were his top 3 complaints. Had been to a few doctors, had had a lot of testing, had ruled out Lyme disease, which is always a concern when we see joint pain and bad fatigue. This guy was pretty seriously fatigued. He had also been diagnosed with IBS, had some alternating constipation, diarrhea. And so he came to me to try to figure out what was happening from the gut perspective, right? We always say test, don't guess when it comes to the gut. And so let's talk about his GI map test. We'll do a run through and I'll tell you what we did and what we found to fix it. Okay, this is his GI map test. As you know, if you've watched previous editions, this is a 4-page test. His first page was completely normal, no abnormal findings. So for the sake of time, we are going to move on. This is the page that talks about dysbiotic and overgrowing bacteria. It's one of the places I like to start to see how much overgrowth there is. Very rarely do I find a GI map where something isn't overgrowing. Remember that your gut is in a constant state of flux as well. And so I regularly see many of these in the red, not always needing treatment, not always, right, a horrible prognosis, but just it's a note to you, a love note to you that if you are running this test and seeing a lot of red before you get to work with a practitioner to help you decode it, please don't panic. So here in the top, dysbiotic overgrowth, we see Enterococcus and we see Streptococcus. Those are 2 very common bacteria that overgrow. As you can see, the levels are quite high of Enterococcus faecalis, not quite as high as strep, but something to note. If we move to the next red highlighted bacteria, you'll see under commensal inflammatory and autoimmune related bacteria, Fusobacterium here was also high. Something significantly high here and something that I would definitely want to treat because it is responsible for inflammatory bowel disease. And that is kind of the picture that I will see together as this test unfolds. Another factor in that is the candida overgrowth, right? So something is overgrowing fairly wildly in his system. And that's what we see from the very first page. The question now is why? So let's take a look at the next page here. Okay, looking at this next page, the picture starts to come together just a little bit more. If you notice at the top, Helicobacter pylori is high here, right? And again, significantly high, almost 3 times the normal reference range. So what does H. pylori do? If you're not familiar, it is a bacterial infection of the lining of the stomach. Because the bacteria infection wants to thrive in your stomach, which is highly acidic by nature, it releases enzymes that lower the acidity of your stomach, making it more hospitable for the H. pylori. That, as you can imagine, has a lot of downline effects. If you do not have the proper pH in your stomach to really break down your foods and all types of foods, the fats, the carbohydrates, the proteins, as well as kill off any bad bugs. As you can imagine, when we eat things, they're not completely clean. Vegetables are full of parasites and bacteria, as is meat, right? It's just nature. But we want really strong stomach acid so that we are killing all of those bad bugs and they're not making their way into our system. H. pylori makes that not so possible because the stomach is just not acidic enough. We go back to the slide previous. And we see that, right? So perhaps it's the fact that there's not quite enough stomach acid that's allowing some of these bad guys here to grow. So we note that at the top, and that generally needs treatment so that everything below the stomach can heal. The next section here is commensal and keystone bacteria. These are the bacteria that we know need to be in your intestines for healthy function. You'll notice here a couple of them one of them is high, a couple of them are low. Akkermansia muciniphila here being very low, under the detectable limit. We know that this commensal bacteria is responsible for the turnover of the lining of the intestines. It's degrading the mucus and creating that turnover in the cells that creates a very healthy lining of the gut. So I here would suspect maybe the beginnings of some leaky gut. We'll look at the next page, which will tell us more about that. But you can see here Enterococcus is overgrowing, and the fecal bacterium Prausnitzii, the one under Akkermansia, also is creeping low. I'd like to see that in the green. So I take those into account when I'm thinking about replenishing bacteria and how we want to do that. The next section here is about bacterial phyla. There are two types of phyla that live in the intestines, Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. What we're really looking at here is the balance. And so we see that that's firmly in the green, and while Bacteroidetes is high, Firmicutes is also high. Again, not quite high, but doing well. So we know there's a little bit of overgrowth here. That's as simple as that. Nothing major needs to happen regarding that. The final page of this test to decode at the top talks about protozoa and parasites. Nothing here was noted. And the bottom half is really an important section, the intestinal health markers. So digestion is the top section, and steatocrit is telling me about how much fat is getting into his stool. And his body's doing a really good job of breaking down and processing fat. And same with the elastase. You can see here that it's firmly in the green. He's doing a very good job of digesting regardless of that H. pylori. So that H. pylori takes a little bit of a back seat for me when I see that digestion is actually not terrible, right? Then we look at the GI markers, beta-glucuronidase, and we look for occult blood in the stool, and you'll see again both of those numbers nice and low. So he's doing a really good job with digestion and intestinal health so far. Then we get to the next section about immune response, and I want you to remember that your immune system starts in your gut. And we see problems with the immune system here with secretory IgA being very high. That's telling me that the immune system is on red alert, that there is some kind of low-grade infection, inflammation, right? Something's happening. So that is a red flag for me. Anti-gliadin IgA here normal. That's telling us whether or not he's really sensitive to gluten, and it doesn't seem to be a problem for him. He didn't report that it was a problem for him. Eosinophil activation protein, also nice and low. So just really the secretory IgA is giving us a hint that something larger is going on. We get down to calprotectin level. How's he doing with inflammation? Okay, but there's definitely some inflammation there, right? I'd like to see that at the very low end of the green. And then the add-on test that we did with him, the zonulin, we are looking for leaky gut. And here you'll see that it's off the charts high. And so that combined, the zonulin combined with the low Akkermansia tells me that he definitely has leaky gut. This can lead to all kinds of problems down the line. When your gut is leaky, let's talk about what that means. In your small intestine, where nutrients are passing through the intestinal wall, you have very, very small holes. But when you have leaky gut, those holes become bigger. And not only are those nutrients getting through, but food particles, a lot of times gluten particles, and those get into your bloodstream and send off red alert. And your body attacks it, right? And that's the beginning of what we're seeing with all this autoimmune disease in people, that it's really starting in the gut. And so that was his test. Let's talk about what I think about some of the combinations of these bacteria that we found. This page comes to you from Diagnostic Solutions Labs. It's the lab that does the GI map test. This is something that's available on their website to everyone. You can go and download it. It's a very, very long interpretive guide. However, page 47, here you'll notice in the very center, mast cell activating bacteria. So he has not been diagnosed. He has a lot of random symptoms. Fatigue, joint pain, and bad allergies, like I said at the beginning, were the three. Upon further exploration after this gut test of what it meant, bad allergies, it wasn't just spring allergies or fall allergies or dander allergies. It was random hives, sometimes facial flushing after he would eat certain things that he wasn't sure. He'd be out to dinner and all of a sudden his face would start flushing. He assumed he was allergic to some kind of food. But that sounded a lot to me like mast cell activation syndrome. Here you'll see mast cell activating bacteria, and this is what the picture looks like in the center. If H. pylori is high, if Enterococcus faecalis is high, Pseudomonas, Staph, Strep, Candida, and the liposaccharide producers. If they're high, that's ringing the bell for mast cell. So I think he had H. pylori, Enterococcus, Staph was a little bit high, Strep was definitely high, Candida was high. Ding, 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 ding. And so we worked to heal his gut. We used berberine, we used turmeric to reduce overall bacteria. He started really taking good care of his mouth, brushing and flossing twice a day, as well as using a mouthwash with a little bit of cinnamon that would work on that fusobacterium that I was worried about. Raising his Akkermansia levels, we did that with the Pendulum Akkermansia probiotic, but I always like to back it up with food-based choices. The red polyphenols are the ones that help to raise Akkermansia levels. So plums and cherries, pomegranates, beets, those are great foods for doing that. So we had some dietary shifts there for sure for him. We did pull some things out of his diet that seemed to be inflaming. He already had been low gluten. We took gluten out for sure. We removed dairy. We made him slightly more plant-based with some light white meat proteins. He did really well healing his gut, and noticed over time that his fatigue and joint pain and a lot of these allergy symptoms went way down. So that's just a really interesting case study where he came in undiagnosed with a bunch of random symptoms, and by doing the gut test and then healing his gut, we were able to remove those symptoms. Those symptoms went away. The mast cell activating bacteria wasn't there anymore, therefore the mast cell activation wasn't happening. So I'm Melissa Hall-Klepacki. My name is my website, melissahallklepacki.com. This is the work that I do, healing people's guts so that they can lose their symptoms and get back to living a vibrant life. I encourage you also to check out www.digestivediscovery.com, where you can order your own GI map test without an expensive appointment. And there's an educational portal built right in there to help you read it. I encourage you to come back here on Tuesdays to watch my Test Don't Guess segments and learn more about how to read your own GI map test. Remember, the data is what you need so that you can finally heal. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.